Hey, ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Zortman coming to you from Coronavirus Central. Um, I am here to go ahead and give you the lecture for today's notes. As usual, we do the critical writing, then we do an activity, and then we do the lecture. So this is the lecture part, as you've already done the critical writing for mental disorders, and you should be working on your activity, which is the mental disorders PowerPoint. So away we go. We start the day as we always do with the word of the day. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. There are a couple forms of this one. It's a persistent pattern of inattention and or hyperactivity impulsivity that interferes with the functioning or development. This is a mental disorder that is usually diagnosed in young children, although adults also have this disorder. Um, this one is kind of on the line. As we get into the notes today, we're going to be talking about mental disorders. These mental disorders are things that outside observers can't really observe you having. Um, Adequately. They need to be diagnosed specifically. The ADHD is on that line of a neurological disorder, which is a disorder of the brain, um, and a mental disorder, which is a disorder of the mind. So the brain, once again, being the 3 pounds of meat, and the mind being a harder to define uh, idea of you and your personality and your way of being. All right, guys. So, welcome back to class. We're going to try and keep this as close to class as normal. So I'm going to try and run this just like a regular class. If at any time you need to pause and go to the restroom, you may. So that was the most important thing out there for some of you. Okay, so we're going to go ahead. We've done the word of the day, ADHD. The book definition is here. The a version of ADHD that you can put as an example would be would be sometimes there are people that just can't sit still in class, or they are um, or they're unable to pay attention even if they are able to sit still. And this is where we get the ADHD. All right. So after the word of the day, obviously we go on to the news of the day. So I've gone ahead and put this here for you. Go ahead and pause your screen so that you can read this. I'm going to go ahead and read it out to you real quick and go over the news of the day. Um, Learning opportunities versus assignments. Okay, well, there's the first one that we messed up. Okay, week of 325. No, that's not right. 323. All right. So, learning opportunities versus assignments. So, we want to be adding things to your life at this point and not stressing you out. So, everything that I am giving you is a learning opportunity, which means that it will in no way negatively impact your daily grades or your semester grade. Um, so, we'll talk a little bit more about grades in a little bit. But the only thing that the learning opportunities can do for you is increase your grade. So that's good. If you have the opportunity to do them, or if you're trying to take the AP test, this is a good thing to do. All right. Also, if you're going to take the AP test, we got this information today. Free online AP classes are available for all AP students. So basically, the AP Classroom app um, has decided to take it a step further and come out with a YouTube channel and give you reviews on all the information. So all the courses will be uploaded by Wednesday, March 25th. I haven't checked to see if the AP Psych is up yet or not, but on Wednesday, definitely check that out. See what you can learn there. So Wednesday, March 25th, the schedule of classes, including descriptions for each lesson, is available at thecollegeboard.org/AP-COVID-19-updates. All classes are available for free and completely optional. Um, where can students access the classes? Students can find the classes at youtube.com/advancedplacement. The courses will wrap up the rest of the semester as well as give a recap of the entire course. So this is good study material, guys. They are altering the test, so I'm going to get to that right now. So this was another email that I got. In addition, please make contact and provide the following information with your students who are scheduled to test before Wednesday the 25th at noon. Traditional AP testing will not take place for the 2019-2020 school year. Information covered will be condensed. Refer to the attached PDF for the material that will be covered. Inform them that the testing will be condensed to 45 minutes and done at home. Reassure them that we will provide them with information they need to prepare for these exams. Ask them if they are still interested in testing. A full refund will be given to those who opt out when we are able to return to campuses. And ask them to complete the Google form that Dr. Brown is sending out with their decision to test or not test. So some of you guys were looking for an out. Here it is. If you want to take advantage of it. It does look like the test will be condensed and probably easier this year. So you might want to take that into consideration as well. So I will be getting more information during a Zoom conference on Wednesday at 1 p.m. And I will put any pertinent information up on Classroom at that point. All right, so part 3, grades are set for the time being. They've closed the grade books at the progress report time, which was yesterday, the 20th. And I don't know when I'm going to have access to my grade book again. If you were on the line, if you had a 78, 79, or a 68, 69, I tried to bump you up. We didn't have a huge notice on this, so I did what I could with the time that I had. There were a couple people that contacted me about their grades, a couple people that did the extra credit that I put up on Classroom, and I tried to add all that. If I missed any of that, go ahead and give me an email, and I will fix that up whenever the grade book reopens. So far, what we know is that April 10th is the day that we go back to school. But we're not sure about that, of course. Everything's changing. Mental disorder project will be due 2 weeks after we get back, and we will still have one in-class day to work on it. So I will still give you that one in-class day with the Chromebooks to work on it, in addition to the one day you've already had. And then it'll be due 2 weeks after we get back. So hopefully that calms some of your fears, let you guys know some stuff that you didn't know. And that is our news section. So moving on, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the notes for today. So we are looking at psychological disorders. So we've talked about this already, but a psychological disorder is a harmful dysfunction in which the behavior is judged to be atypical, disturbing, maladaptive, and unjustifiable. So socially, we all get together and decide what is a psychological disorder. So some things that were psychological disorders in the past are not considered psychological disorders now. Some things that were not psychological disorders in the present or in the past are disorders now. So this can all tie into your culture, the time period, the environmental conditions. For instance, right now, um, they really wouldn't test a lot of people for anxiety because at the moment, pretty much everybody has anxiety. So um, it's not at this time uh, atypical, right? Because it's typical, and atypical means not typical. All right, so let's go ahead and move on. At any time that you need to, go ahead and pause this to get the notes. So the early theories. Early theories for mental disorders were a different version of people were possessed by evil spirits. They had bad humors. They were subject to a miasma or a witch had possessed them. All these basically meant the same thing, which is that they were doing something abnormal that everybody didn't like and they might not like, but they didn't know what it was. So if you were possessed by evil spirits, how would they drive them out? Um, they would use music or singing to try and chase the evil spirits away. Sometimes, if that didn't work, we would get into trephining. Trephining was cutting a hole in somebody's head to let out the evil spirit. So you see an example of trephining here. Most of the time that people were trephined, they died. There were some people that were that survived, and most of them were mentally impaired in some form. We do a version of trephining now called frontal lobotomy, but we will get into that in the next chapter. All right, so here are some trephining tools over the years. Here are some pictures of how to do a trephining. So a little disturbing. All right, another theory was to make the body extremely uncomfortable. So this one actually does come into play in behaviorism. So if somebody was doing a behavior that you did not like, you would make their body extremely uncomfortable, either with heat or cold or pain, and sometimes that would cause them to stop doing the behavior. This, as we later found out, is just uh, classical or operant conditioning. So this theory does have some basis in reality, but it really wasn't to drive the evil spirits out. It was to change their behavior because of punishments. All right. So in 1800, this is when we started to get the scientific revolution in mental health, at least. And we stopped using the term madmen and started to use terms like mentally ill, mentally disabled, things like that. So they're taken out of sanitariums and sometimes put into hospitals. This helps people. For instance, if you have syphilis and you have dementia based on syphilis, clearing up the syphilis clears up the dementia. So that's where that is. So putting them into hospitals didn't necessarily mean that they had better treatment, though. All right, so early mental hospitals. They were prisons. They were not only prisons, but they were prisons where the guards were never held accountable because the people that they were guarding were unreliable, and so they'd say, "Oh, they're hitting me," and people would say, "Oh, yeah, that's just your mental disorder." A lot of times they were chained up, locked away, given stale, moldy bread, not the best food, not the best accommodations. Some hospitals even charged admission to see people that were in mental hospitals, especially famous people. There was a philosopher by the name of Nietzsche that spent the last years of his life. He contracted syphilis and was going through dementia based on syphilis, and people would pay the mental hospital money to go in and see him. So this was not the best outcome, obviously. So as far as people we need to know, Philippe Pinel, he's a French doctor who was one of the first to say, okay, we need to cure these people. We can't just lock them up and put them in a hole forever. We've got to try and get a cure going, just like we would for any other disease. And some diseases are incurable, but we need to at least try and get them to where they can live on their own. All right. So at this time, it's believed that mental illness had a bodily cause. So now we moved the other way. We moved from the completely spiritual to now we're looking at something called a somatogenic model, which is that your mental disorders are caused by a germ or a something in the body that is not right. So somatogenics has its place. Syphilis is an example, but somatogenics doesn't explain all disorders. As a matter of fact, the ones we're going to look at today are not somatogenic, but they they can't explain a bunch of disorders. So there are things that happen to your brain that can cause mental disorders, but some of them are psychogenic, and they have psychological, not physical, problems with them. All right, so the current perspective is the medical perspective. Psychological disorders are a sickness that can be diagnosed, treated, and sometimes cured. So this is where we're at now, and going forward. So the most common perspective is using three of the schools that we've talked about: the biological, the psychoanalytic, and the sociocultural perspectives. So we call it the biopsychosocial perspective. And it assumes that there's a factor in biology, there's a physical factor, there's a psychological factor, and there's a cultural factor that combine to create these psychological disorders. So we can't just attack it one way. We can't just go with drug therapy, bio, or we can't just go with therapy, which is psycho, or we can't just say society should accept all these behaviors. It's fine. So social. A combination of these is being used. All right. So this model used to be called the diathesis stress model. So if you see that, that's just the biopsychosocial perspective. All right. So the DSM-5, Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, is the big book of disorders. So over here I have a quick reference to the DSM-4. The DSM-5 is obviously the new one. They update it about every 2 or 3 years, and this is how we classify psychological disorders. Usually there's a checklist in the DSM, and in order to have a disorder, you've got to meet so many checks so that you can meet the disorder criteria. So there's two major classifications in the DSM of diagnoses. There's the neurotic disorders. Oh, I skipped this one because this is old information. It's for the DSM-4, and we don't use it anymore. All right, so neurotic disorders. So neurotic disorders are distressing, but they can still function in society and act rationally. So a neurotic disorder is something that you can look at somebody and say, okay, they have a mental disorder, but we can manage it. We can function in society. We can make rational decisions. We are able to live on our own, and we just need some extra help to get the disorder under control. And then there is a psychotic disorder. And a psychotic disorder is somebody who loses contact with reality. They experience distorted perceptions. So they don't know what's really going on in reality. And these people are the ones that usually need to be hospitalized, um, or taken care of because they are at that level. So there's a lot more neurotic disorders than there are psychotic disorders out there. But the psychotic ones are obviously the ones that get more attention because they are so debilitating. All right, so that I believe is it for this one. Yep. And we're going to go ahead and take a look at the different categories now. So in these categories, you guys are doing the mental disorder project right now. And you have one of these categories. I got them from these notes. So you should be an expert on one of them. You might even know more than I do about it. But we'll go ahead and go through them. I'm just going to hit the high spots of all of them. This will take a while. Don't think you have to watch this whole lecture in one sitting. You might want to take it in one or two sittings. It was going to be 2 class periods, so I'll let you know that. Let me go ahead and get up personality disorders. Okay, so this is the big one. All right, guys. So we've got personality disorders now. So personality disorders are a psychological disorder characterized by inflexible and enduring behavior or patterns that impair social functioning. So personality disorders are a behavior that you do that you can't break out of, that is going to stop you from being able to be in society. So let's go ahead and take a look at these notes. Got the Simpson notes here. All right. So paranoid personality disorder. This is a distrust of others and constant suspicions that others around you have sinister motives. So if everybody's out to get you, if there are people following you, if um, there's always a plot against you that's causing you the bad things in your life. This is on the road to paranoid personality disorders. So they search for hidden meanings in everything and read hostile intentions into the actions of others. They're quick to challenge the loyalty of their friends and loved ones and often appear cold and distant to others. They usually shift the blame to others and tend to carry long grudges. So, as we get into personality disorders, let me just tell you that as your particular personalities are forming still as teenagers, most doctors will not diagnose teenagers with personality disorders because they're still struggling with their identity and finding their personality, and therefore they pop in and out of having these tendencies Tendencies do not necessarily mean disorders. All right, so antisocial personality disorder. This is the one that people get wrong the most. So, antisocial does not mean that you don't want to hang out with your friends. That would be being asocial. So, there's 3 steps here. There's prosocial. Prosocial is that you want society to succeed. Then there is asocial, which is you just really don't care. Um, so asocial behavior is not hanging out with people, not being part of society. And then antisocial is actively wanting um, this to fail. So antisocial personality disorders are characterized by a lack of conscience. Uh, the 2 most common types of this are psychopathy and sociopathy. A psychopath is somebody who basically does not have that part of the brain. They never had it and they never will. Um, a sociopath is somebody who can shut off the part of their brain that tells them right from wrong. So that's the difference there. People with this disorder are prone to criminal behaviors, and whenever they do take advantage of somebody, they think that it is funny. So they're careless with money and take actions without thinking about consequences. They're often aggressive and more concerned with their own needs than the needs of others. All right, so now we get into some serious stuff, some stuff that you might have seen tendencies of already, which is borderline personality disorder. This is a mood instability because of a poor self-image. So people with this disorder are prone to big mood swings and bouts of anger. So it would be getting angry and then crying about it. Things that sometimes people in abusive relationships will do. Borderline personality disorder usually try and take their anger out on themselves. They try and control people. One of the ways that they control people is threatening self-harm, right? They threaten to kill themselves. They say, things like, I would die without you, kind of thing. Um, so they're quick to anger when their expectations are not met, and they might lash out when that happens. Histrionic personality disorder. So we've seen this, obviously. It's constant attention seekers. They need to be the center of attention all the time. They need to dominate the conversation. Um, if they're in a peer group with a bunch of friends, they want to always be the ones talking. They're the ones that want to one up somebody all the time. Oh, well, I had that, but it was worse, or I had that, but it was with a celebrity, or all this kind of stuff. Name dropping, things like that would fall under histrionic. So they may dress provocatively or exaggerate illnesses in order to gain attention. We talked a little bit about Munchausen syndrome and how sometimes people know they're not sick, but they pretend to be sick in order to gain sympathy, or they make themselves sick in order to gain sympathy. They also tend to exaggerate friendships and relationships, believing that everybody loves them. So they may have bumped into a celebrity at one point in time, and they'll tell you that, oh yeah, I met this guy and he's my best friend, and things like that. So cousin to histrionic personality disorder is the narcissistic personality disorder. This is characterized by self-centeredness. Remember, as young adults, you've just come out of your second um, round of of, ooh, give me a second. But yeah, so you've just come out of your second round of, can't think of the word. It'll come to me in a minute. Um, Narcissistic personality disorder people exaggerate their achievements and expect others to recognize them as being superior. Egocentrism. Haha, I knew I'd get to the word. So you guys have come out of your second round of egocentrism, which is also characterized by self-centeredness. Thinking that you're the only person that's felt those feelings, that nobody else understands. This is in line with narcissistic personality disorder, but remember, tendencies don't make disorders. So they exaggerate their achievements and expect others to recognize them as being superior. So narcissistic personality disorders, people that have those disorders tend to be choosy about picking their friends, since they believe that not just anybody is worthy of being their friend. So they're only going to be friends with people that are useful to them. They're generally uninterested in the feelings of others, and they may take advantage of them. All right, schizoid personality disorder. So on the flip side, so we've been talking about people that are all about themselves. This is kind of the same thing and kind of not. Schizoid personality disorders, people that have those disorders have a tendency to avoid relationships. They usually don't show a lot of emotion. They want to be alone. They don't secretly wish for popularity. Some people with mental disorders say they want one thing and actually want another thing. People with schizoid personality disorders just really want to be left alone. They tend to seek jobs that require little social contact. Their social skills are often weak and they don't show a need for attention or acceptance. They're perceived as humorless and distant. Often they're called loners. So they just like to stay to themselves. A lot of times they will sequester themselves. They get jobs like programmers, and they get carry out food from the same 2 or 3 places every day, and try and stay away from the population. All right, so schizoid personality disorder can lead into this one, schizotypal personality disorder. Um, so this one is a need for social isolation, and that social isolation leads to odd behavior and thinking. So this is a cousin to schizophrenia, but not exactly schizophrenia. So you're going to get unconventional beliefs, such as being convinced that you have extrasensory perceptions, that you can hear other people's thoughts, that you can make the rain happen, things like that. Some people believe that schizotypal personality disorder is a mild form of schizophrenia. All right. So avoidant personality disorder. This is a little bit different still. So pervasive pattern of social inhibitions, meaning they don't want to go out. They feel inadequate and are extremely sensitive to negative evaluation. So they consider themselves to be socially inept, personally unappealing, and avoid social interactions for fear of being ridiculed or humiliated. So people with avoidant personality disorders want to be part of society. They want to uh, be included. They just don't want to be ridiculed or told that they did something wrong. And so they keep themselves apart for that reason. And then dependent personality disorder. Okay, this is characterized by a pervasive psychological dependence on other people. Um, So they have difficulty making everyday decisions without excessive amounts of advice and reassurance from others. So this is the person that wants to come up and say, am I doing this right? Is this the way to go? Is this the way to proceed? Is this right? Is this right? Is this right? So that would be a dependent personality disorder. So we're going to talk about OCD in two sections here. This one is OCPD, obsessive compulsive personality disorder. And OCPD is basically the obsessive part is that you can't stop thinking about something. The compulsive part is the fact that you can't stop thinking about something makes you want to do something. So OCPD, we're looking at perfectionism. People that get anxious when they perceive that things are not right with the world. Um, this may be that things aren't in the right place, things didn't go right, somebody tried to cut them off in traffic. All these things can be signs of OCPD. So, moving forward, we're going to move off of personality disorders, and we're going to move to mood disorders. So, mood disorders are psychological disorders characterized by emotional extremes. So, this is your emotions are causing the problem. So we've got three main ones here that we're going to talk about, and then this one is and isn't, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. So depression. Depression is the most common diagnosis of all mental disorders. Um, it's usually a warning sign that something else is wrong. So if you go in with depression, they might try and dig deeper because they want to get at what is causing the depression. Depression is not just being sad, it's being sad for no reason for more than 2 weeks. And there are other criteria in the DSM that you would have to meet in order to have depression. All right, so reading graphs time. This one is a weird one, and I picked it out of the book, but I picked it because it was so weird whenever I looked at it that I had to point it out to you. So, the conclusion that they put here is around the world, women are more susceptible to depression. And this is the percentage of uh, 18 to 84-year-olds experiencing major depression sometime in life. All right. So, taking a look at this list, take a look at the bottom of the list, and this will give you a hint as to what is going on. So, your first hint is right here, West Germany, right? West Germany means that it was after World War II. It was after 1945. Your other big hint over here is Korea. Note that it does not say North and South Korea, it just says Korea, meaning that Korea was still one country. So now we're talking about right after World War II. So 45 to 50 is when this came out. I don't know why they would put that in a modern book, but they did, and I wanted to break this down so that you guys could see it. So it's saying that women are much more likely to have depression than men. It's not necessarily the case. Women are much more likely to go to the doctor than men. So that is part of it. The other part of it is, look at West Germany, right? What happened to the male population of West Germany right after World War II? It was obviously low because all the men who died in war. Same thing with Paris, right? So you got Paris over here. What was going on in Beirut? What happened there? It was basically um, in Beirut, the country of Israel was being formed, and so they were being kicked out of their houses. So this is this huge spike here. So just saying to critically look at your charts so that you know what's going on. I don't think this is a particularly useful chart to say the point. I think this is a useful chart to show you that sometimes people will put charts in something that don't relate in order to prove their point. All right, so percentage of depressed males and females by age. Okay, so starting off at 12 to 17, we have a spike, all right as women are entering their prime childbearing years is the highest percentage of depression, and also the most likely that they're going to the doctors on a regular basis. Men, on the other hand, go to the doctors far less, so they're less likely to be diagnosed. So at about 44, they start to converge until 75, when now everybody has to go to the doctors because they're dealing with age-related problems, and they're almost identical. All right, so depression, major depressive disorder. So this is the type of depression that we are most commonly talking about when we talk about depression. It's somebody who, for no apparent reason, experiences 2 or more weeks of depressed moods. It includes feelings of worthlessness and diminished interest in pleasure in most activities. So 2 or more weeks, you don't really care about things you used to care about anymore. You don't like doing things you used to do. Sometimes suicidal thoughts will creep in, and this is indications of major depressive disorders. Dystemic disorder. This is mild depression every day for at least 2 years. So this is kind of a plodding depression that you can get through the day. You just don't like getting through the day. You don't like pretty much anything. So dystemic disorders, it's milder, but it's lasted for a long time, usually 2 or more years. So major depressive disorder is a little bit more common in women. Dystemic disorder is a little bit more common in men. All right, seasonal affective disorder. So seasonal affective disorder is just what it sounds like. Different seasons of the year can cause depression in different people. This can be due to trauma that they had during that part of the year, or it could just be due to biological factors such as not getting as much sun, or getting too much sun, things like that. All right. So now we talk about bipolar disorder. So bipolar disorder, it does have a depression component, but it also has a mania component. So this is usually a biological disorder that also has psychological triggers. So once again, biopsychosocial perspective. So the person alternates between hopelessness and lethargy and overexcited states such as mania. So the depression, they're down, they can't get out of bed, they don't feel like doing anything, right? And then they get into a super excited state where they want to go do everything and create everything. And this has been shown to, in most people, be a problem with serotonin production. Their body will either make all the serotonin or none of the serotonin, but it won't make some serotonin, which is what you need. So you need some serotonin in your system at all times to keep you going. But people with bipolar disorder, it's like the faucet only goes on full blast or not at all. All right, so some famous people that have either been diagnosed with or suspected to have bipolar disorder. All right. Uh, all right. So here's what a brain looks like on bipolar disorder. We have the depressed state. So this was the 17th of May. We have a depressed state brain. So there's very little activity going on, not a lot of excitement, not a lot of imagination or thought. Um, then we go into the manic state one day later, right? So the brain is all lit up. And then 10 days later or 9 days later, we have back to a depressed state. So these are wild swings. A lot of bipolar people like their mania, which is a problem because they want that mania, but they don't want the depression. And so whenever they're depressed, they go on their medication, but then whenever they swing to manic, they stop their medication. So this makes it very hard to treat. All right, norepinephrine increases arousal and boosts mood. So this is one of the neurotransmitters that has been looked at, as well as serotonin, to try and stabilize moods. So suicide rates. All right. So this is also an old chart, but it is from the 80s. Um, we've got suicide rates per 100,000 people. Obviously, men have a much higher suicide rate by this chart than women. Women have more attempts, but men have more completions. The reason is women usually try and use medication, which is usually vomited out at the last minute, whereas men have a tendency to use more violent means like drugs, or like guns, I'm sorry. All right, so suicide rate over the last century, 1960 to 1990. 1960, we have 4% going all the way up to almost 12% in 1990, and then down to 10% going into the 2000s. All right, so that is it for mood disorders. Let's go ahead and take a look. Oh, let's go ahead and take a look at dissociative disorders. So guys, anytime you need to, go ahead and pause this. This is more than halfway through, so if you've hung with me this long, I really appreciate it. Go ahead and pause this, go to the bathroom, do what you need to do. Watch this at your leisure, okay? I don't want you guys freaking out, thinking you got to sit here for an hour and a half and listen to all this. All right, so dissociative disorders. Okay, so dissociative disorders very hard to diagnose because it happens all inside their head. Most of these happen all inside somebody's head, but you can see the outside behaviors change, which is what we're looking at. But in dissociative disorders, not so much. Sometimes behaviors change, but not necessarily. All right, so dissociative disorders in general. Dissociative disorder is a disorder in which conscious awareness becomes separated or dissociated from previous memories, thoughts, and feelings. So your awareness is different than your memories, thoughts, and feelings. You're going to uh, see yourself as if you're watching yourself, kind of thing. All right, so dissociative amnesia. We're going to talk a little bit about multiple types of amnesia here, but dissociative amnesia is amnesia that is characterized by blocking out critical personal information, usually of a traumatic or stressful nature. So dissociative amnesia is usually amnesia that's caused by a traumatic event. So something is traumatic, something is stressful, and your brain just blocks it out. Freud would call this repression. So dissociative amnesia, or just blocking out the information. So dissociative amnesia does not result from medical trauma such as a blow to the head, a part of the brain getting damaged by cancer, things like that. It is just amnesia based on a mental block, basically. All right. So we're going to look at a couple of different types of amnesia. Localized amnesia is present in an individual who has no memory of specific events that took place, usually traumatic events. The loss of memory is localized within a specific window of time. So, for example, if you survived a car wreck and had no experience until 2 days after the car wreck, that would be a localized amnesia. Selective amnesia is when you can only access a small part of the events that took place. Um, so, an abuse victim, this one's more common in abuse, um, can recall only some small parts of the events around the abuse and not the whole thing. Generalized amnesia is whenever they can't remember anything in their past. So this would be a much more severe type where you just can't remember anything. And then systemized amnesia is a loss of memory for a specific category of information. Like you're missing memories about one specific family member, or you're missing memories about uh, one place that you've been multiple times, things like that. All right, so a dissociative fugue. So I know some of you guys have seen these silver alerts, where they say silver alert, somebody usually in a beige Pontiac or beige Buick, 85, lost from Corpus Christi or things like that. What they're worried about here is that they're in a dissociative fugue. So an individual with a dissociative fugue suddenly and unexpectedly takes physical leave of his or her surroundings and sets off on a journey of some kind. So you dissociate, you're not really all there, and you just go somewhere. You just up and leave. So dissociative fugues. The journeys can last hours, several days, or several months. Individuals experiencing dissociative fugues have traveled over thousands of miles. Usually, when men have a dissociative fugue, They have a tendency to get into a vehicle and drive. Women have a tendency to walk, and so are much easier to find and recover, usually. Individual in a fugue state is unaware or confused about their identity. They might look around and see something and say that's their name. And in some cases will assume a new identity, although this is an exception. But there have been cases where people have gone on a fugue and started a whole new life and family and things like that. All right, depersonalization disorder is marked by feelings of detachment or distance from your own experience, body, or self. So it's kind of like being spaced out, but even more so. Um, Kind of like you think that you're in a dream when you're alive, when you're awake. Uh, Sometimes depersonalization can get to the level of psychopathy, where they, uh, I'm sorry, not psychopathy, a psychotic or a psychotic, uh, sorry, that was my dog. That was the other dog. Okay. Yeah, let me pause this real quick. Oh, there they go. All right. So, yeah, psychotic episodes where they don't believe that the world exists, things like that. All right. Dissociative identity disorder. So, this one is used very often in movies and TV. It's a very, very rare disease. So, it's where somebody has multiple personalities. It used to be called multiple personality disorder, but people used to say they had multiple personality disorder without being diagnosed with it. And so, like they do with so many things, they changed the name so that psychiatrists would know at a glance who actually has it and who doesn't. All right, and the last one we're going to look at here in dissociative disorders is conversion disorder. So, conversion disorder is whenever you have a psychological reason that you are either blind or paralyzed or can't feel a certain part of your body, but there's no medical reason that you have those symptoms. So you're blind, but your eyes work, your occipital lobe works, all the connections work, but you still can't see anything. In that case, we call it a conversion disorder. It's something in your head that's making it happen. We're just not exactly sure what. Same thing with people that are paralyzed, but they have no nerve damage, right? They are paralyzed, but they we can't explain why, and so we would label that a conversion disorder. All right, so we're getting there, guys. We got two more, I believe. Yeah, anxiety disorders and schizophrenia. So, anxiety. Sure, some people are feeling some anxiety right now. Um, Anxiety disorders are a group of conditions where the primary symptoms are anxiety or a defense against anxiety. The patient fears something awful will happen to them. Are anxiety disorders a neurosis or a psychosis? The answer is both. They can raise to a level of a psychosis. Most people with anxiety are neurotic or having neurosis. which means that they can function in society. They just need some help to get over this particular anxiety or fear. So, what is anxiety? The book definition is it's a state of intense apprehension, uneasiness, uncertainty, or fear. So, this is for it to be anxiety, it has to be to the level of stopping you from doing something. So, if you want to do something but you can't, um, then it is at the level of anxiety. If you didn't want to do it anyways and you don't, then that's not anxiety, that's just fear or disinterest. All right, so a couple different types of anxiety disorders. First one is generalized anxiety disorder, sometimes abbreviated to GAD. The anxiety disorder where the person is continuously tense, apprehensive, and in a state of autonomic nervous system arousal. So they're always on edge. They always think something bad's about to happen. They're not exactly sure what that is, but they're always on edge and tense. They feel inadequate, they're oversensitive, and can't concentrate. Some of them suffer from insomnia with generalized anxiety disorder. All right, so on the flip side, panic disorder. Um, these generalized anxiety disorder is your whole life. Panic disorders are minutes long episodes of intense dread where somebody has terror and fear, sometimes chest pain, not being able to breathe, other frightening sensations come up. Um, it can be caused by secondary disorders such as phobias, but panic disorders are things that they hit you. They're like wave. You've got to ride them out, and then they go away, and they might come back. There is a cycle with panic disorders. For instance, especially if you have agoraphobia, which is fear of being embarrassed in public. So if you have a fear of being embarrassed in public and then you have a panic attack, even if not everybody's looking at you, it feels like everybody's looking at you. And so now you're afraid of having a panic attack and looking foolish again. So that might lead into another panic attack. It's a very bad situation. All right, so phobias. We're going to look at a brief list of phobias here, but phobias are a person's experiences a sudden episode of intense dread. So they are very afraid of a specific thing. For instance, snakes, spiders, children, or birthday parties could all be reasons there. All right. So you guys can peruse this at your own leisure. I'm going to open it up real quick. But this is the phobias list link. Um, Basically, this is a list of phobias that that somebody has gotten and put up online. It's been around for quite a while, and it's going to go through all of the things that we have words for phobias. So you can be phobic about anything. So here's just a taste. You can go ahead and click on it on your notes and take a look at it in a more leisurely time. But the phobias list link. All right. So obsessive compulsive personality disorder we already talked about. Um, Obsessive compulsive anxiety disorder is a little bit different. So this is an obsession. You think that you have to do something or something bad will happen. Sometimes you know what that bad thing is will happen. Sometimes you don't, but you know something bad will happen. So this is an obsession that you think about. I have to do this. I have to do this ritual, or something bad is going to happen in my life. So trying to think of how to do this. Um, I'm going to show you very quickly um, online um, a YouTube that you can watch. All right, so see this one here? If you type in Dr. Kevin Casey OCD, there is a clip here. It's going to be Michael J. Fox in the show Scrubs, and he's going to give you probably one of the best depictions of OCD that I've seen out there. So if you want to take a look at that, I would do it right here, but I don't want this to get taken down because of copyright. So here it is right here. All right, let's get back to the PowerPoint. All right, so some common examples of OCD, because some common obsessions over on this side, some common compulsions over on this side. The compulsion does not necessarily have to match up with the obsession. Um, Basically, it's a ritual that you do uh, to calm your obsession. All right. So why do people get anxiety disorders? Um, you learn them through conditioning. This can happen with phobias and things like that. Um, there are evolutionary reasons for having anxiety. People that were afraid of things usually lived longer and could pass on their genes. Um, and there are physiological reasons that people have anxiety. Um, One of the things that's happened in modern times that's kind of uh, created a lot of problems with anxiety is back in the olden days, back when we're talking about tribalism and things like that. Um, if you were in danger or if you were anxious, the best thing that you could do is get ready to fight or run away. Um, Nowadays, not so much, right? If your boss is yelling at you, or if your parents or teachers are yelling at you, not always the best thing to get into a fight or flight response. But your brain has adapted to say stress, get ready to fight or run away. So that's the physiology there of anxiety. All right, so one more to go, guys. Once again, if you need to pause, take a break, totally understand. Just come back and finish it up at your leisure. Like I said, this was supposed to be a 2-day lecture that was going to be broken up with some other activities, but we're condensing it a little bit and trying to get it all to you today. All right, so schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a very hard to define mental illness. How prevalent is it? About 1 in 100 people in America are diagnosed with schizophrenia. That doesn't mean that we've got them all, but it's pretty good numbers there. It's about a 1%. So there are several different symptoms of schizophrenia. You don't have to have all the symptoms to be diagnosed with schizophrenia. Disorganized thinking, disturbed perceptions, inappropriate emotions, and actions are the 3 big ones. So a person with disorganized thinking, they have fragmented, distorted, or false beliefs. Their disorganized thinking comes from a breakdown in selective attention. They can't filter out information. So we talked about sensation. They're trying to process everything they sense, not everything they perceive or are conscious of. So this can lead to delusions. The 2 most common delusions are delusions of persecution. Everybody's out to get me. Somebody's chasing me. These can lead to hallucinations where you actually put your persecutor or create them inside your head. And then the other one is delusions of grandeur, where you think that you are more important than you are, or you think that you are have special powers, right? You can walk on water, you can fly. Disturbed perceptions. So disturbed perceptions here, what we're talking about mainly is hallucinations. Hallucinations are sensory experiences without sensory stimulation. 2 most common ones are visual. You see something that's not there, or auditory. You hear something that's not there. And then inappropriate emotions and actions. So this would be repeatedly doing inappropriate actions or emotions for what's going on. So laughing at inappropriate times, like at a funeral, or having a flat affect. You can't have emotions for anything, basically. Senseless compulsive acts. So this is kind of like OCD without the obsession part. You're just doing things over and over again because it calms you down, or it is something that you need to do. Or catatonia in the most extreme cases, which is that you're just blank. And sometimes you can feed yourself, sometimes you can dress yourself, but not much more than that. All right. So undifferentiated schizophrenia. We've talked about this in class for a couple of classes. Some of you guys didn't get this yet. But undifferentiated schizophrenia, especially in Texas, is kind of the diagnosis of we don't know. So if they come in, they say they heard voices once, or they say that they saw something that wasn't really there once, or if they start talking about things that are not possible, things like that, they have a tendency to very quickly label them undifferentiated schizophrenia. So if you see undifferentiated schizophrenia on a chart, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have it. It means the doctor doesn't 100% know what they have. So there are many and varied symptoms to undifferentiated schizophrenia, and it's kind of the basket that they put everything into. That is that. All right. So if you have hung with me this long, thank you so much. If you would, in the comment section, write the words North Shore Strong. I'll make sure that you get some extra credit at my first opportunity to get you some extra credit. So thank you very much, guys. So stay North Shore strong. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope that I get to see you guys again soon. Um, if not, we will continue to do classes like this. On Friday, I will put up a critical writing for the next chapter, and then we'll go over it on the next video that I make, and so on and so forth. So miss you guys. Take care, and I hope to see you soon.